Hello, I'm Jay Huddleston. This is my second in the War on Drugs uh, dialogue, monologue. Um, my previous address on ending the war on drugs drew many people and also drew them to my blog, Houston's Dirty Drug War, at blogspot.com. The war on drugs is a failed experiment in American history that has pitted the government, represented by politicians and law enforcement, against the people who pay for it all. A staggering number of Americans can't find work because the stigma of a drug arrest on their background check prevents them from being hired. Meanwhile, for their failure, Congress, state legislatures, and local governments throw more and more money into the war on drugs, which is a meat grinder tearing up our people, especially the poor and young people. Decrease supply and demand. That was the drug war mission in 1972 when Nixon started it. Today, drugs are exponentially more popular among the people. Demand is up, way up, and the supply has never been stronger. The net result has been stable prices for drugs, and in the case of cocaine and marijuana, the price has actually gone down dramatically. The only accomplishment of the war on drugs has been to incarcerate millions of Americans since 1972. Keep in mind that drug crime is separate from violent crime, and even money laundering, organized crime, and tax evasion. If you were caught doing these things, you were charged accordingly. The government has sold the drug war to a gullible public by blurring the line between simple possession and violent crime. Of the hundreds of thousands of men and women behind bars right now who did nothing but possess drugs, cocaine for example, the profound majority were small-time users caught with less than 1 gram of cocaine. It is difficult for me to make a connection between a kid with trace amounts of dope and the kind of gangland violence the media portrays as the norm in drug reality. Think about all the cops killed doing their job enforcing zero tolerance and other drug war idiocies. Did those dead cops really give up their lives willingly because in their heart of hearts they thought it was important to fight a drug war that they were losing before they ever even began? What a waste. Even cops know their services are wasted in petty dope arrests when they could be out chasing real bad guys. Teenage kids in some garage smoking a bong do not represent a threat to the safety of the American people, and they aren't violent criminals. Drug war propaganda holds American drug users responsible for the deaths of every cop killed on the street. And it's the small-time users who are caught and punished most of the time, not the big gangster kingpins. During alcohol prohibition of the 1920s, organized crime was blamed. Speakeasy club goers weren't considered evil, but glamorous. Now the small-time users are blamed for the increasing number of cops and other law enforcement killed. Through steady propaganda, drug users are made evil in the media. It's reefer madness syndrome. Prohibition creates organized crime. Organized crime creates corrupt cops and politicians on the take. One dirty cop or politician represents a far greater threat to the safety of Americans than a dozen crackheads getting high in an abandoned building. Propaganda is sinister in a lot of small ways that have an overwhelming cumulative power. Some people believe it is overkill to fear propaganda. America doesn't engage in false propaganda. Well, we do. Remember, during World War II, the press were prohibited from photographing FDR in a wheelchair. He was in a wheelchair, they just couldn't photograph it. For whatever reason, the government thought it would make him and the U.S. look weak or crippled or whatever. It is a perfect example of propaganda and media compliance with it, and proof that even the U.S., the good guys, engage regularly in propaganda and have forever. The link between drugs and violence is pure propaganda used to sell the war on drugs to the people. Because law enforcement can't get a handle on violent crime, if you add the 17% of felons they have in custody for violence to the 40% of felons they have in custody for drugs, then you report to the public that 57% of the people behind bars are there for violent crime and drugs. This does two things. It makes it look like they have more violent crime solved than they have, and it links drugs in the minds of Americans where to violence when there is no logical link between violent crime and drug possession. It is like linking rapes and tax evasion. Where is the connection? But if you could put them together, it would make it look like you're catching a lot more rapists than you're doing, and at the same time you give the reputation of tax cheats a black eye. That's how propaganda works. 6 million people this last decade came out of prison. Where do they go? 2.5 million of them are drug felons. A Justice Department report entitled "The Prevalence of Imprisonment in U.S. Population," released in 2003, estimated that as of 2001, 1 out of every 37 Americans had served time in prison, and at the same time estimated the odds of an American going to prison in his or her lifetime was 1 in 8. Here's how it breaks down racially. If you're a black man, your lifetime odds of going to prison were 1 in 3. For Hispanic men, it was 1 in 6, and for white men, it was 1 in 17. These numbers reveal a system of apartheid in America that is hidden in plain sight. How can we clamor for human rights and freedom abroad and through the United Nations when the U.S. is operating the worst gulag system on the globe? When America is incarcerating its people at a rate of 800 inmates per 100,000 of the population, Western Europe only imprisons its people at an average of around 200 prisoners per 100,000 of the population. Are Americans 4 times worse than Europeans? If you believe the drug war is good, then your answer is yes. Americans are 4 times more criminal than Europeans. And if you support the drug war, as it is, you are also saying black men in America are more than 5 times worse than whites and 3 times worse than Hispanics. Hispanics are only 2 times as bad as whites. These are your laws, people. When you pay your taxes, this is what you're getting. Racist gulags, 4 times as prevalent as prisons in Europe. Corporate welfare, 3 strikes, you're out. All across the country there are so-called 3 strikes and you're out laws where if you commit 3 felonies, you either go to prison for life or some horrendously long time. Here in Texas, the habitual felon sentence, called the bitch, is 25 years without parole, day for day, and they have a lesser one called the baby bitch that's just 15 years. Anyway, many of the companies that defraud American taxpayers, Boeing, Halliburton, etc., through government contracts and overbilling, Many of the countries that defraud American taxpayers, Boeing, Halliburton, etc., through government contract overbilling, fraud, and providing faulty goods and services are found guilty time after time. They're given some pitifully small fine compared to the penalties some small-time drug users pay. But unlike drug felons, who face 3 strikes you're out, companies like Halliburton and Boeing are welcomed back to the trough time after time until they're caught again, fined again, and forgiven again. Why is leniency shown to deliberate criminal acts of self-enrichment, but drug addicts are given no mercy whatsoever? Is that fair? The real scandal, you're paying for it. What do you get for your money? Private prison companies building and operating for-profit prisons that are going up like Starbucks locations all over the country. The more people we can stuff in these McPrisons, the more they can pay their shareholders. When private stock shareholders are paid money from U.S. tax dollars, say it with me, that's corporate welfare. Protect the people. That's law enforcement's role. Does the war on drugs protect people from violence? No. Does it protect addicts with treatment options? No. Does it provide housing, clothing, food, or anything that protects people? No. The war on drugs, the war paradigm, who are the parties in the war on drugs? It's the U.S. government versus the U.S. people. Drug felons like myself may be considered loyalists